our space. As a child, I didn't understand restricted covenants. What was that? I just knew that this was my community. I also knew that there was this almost unspoken caution that you could not go across Lincoln Boulevard to the north side of Lincoln and be safe. I knew that. We didn't have to talk about it. We knew that. And why was that? Because that was the way this community was built. But it was in the 60s when we understood more about what that meant. We understood that that was discriminatory. We understood that that was racist. We understood that that restricted covenants only meant us and other people of color. It didn't mean white folks who could come into where we live. It didn't mean that they were restricted from going anywhere. And it was the eye-opening experience of people like myself and people before me, and since then, that said we have to fight for justice. Is it an ongoing fight? 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. The 1964 civil rights or voting rights, 1965 civil rights. Just a few years ago, Section 5, I believe, of the Voting Rights Act was taken out by Congress, and that section said to southern states that here's your Voting Rights Act, you have to report to the federal government any changes that you make in the voting laws and capabilities of African Americans in your community. That was taken out. Why? Because it was said that after 50 years it wasn't needed anymore. So it was removed. And if you look at what's happening across America today, you see that there's an increasing number of policies and prohibitions and barriers to African Americans to vote. Whether it's being taken off of the voting rolls, whether it's being told that you have to pass a test, or it's being told that you have to be able to read at a certain level. Whatever the prohibitions are, they are here and rising. What is our responsibility as African American people, people of culture and understanding, and not just us, but people who have the same consciousness about social justice as we do? It is our responsibility to fight for it. It's our responsibility to live it. It's our responsibility to call it out when it's happening. It's our responsibility to educate those individuals who say to us, I don't get it. I don't know what your problem is. Why are you, do you call that my fault? Yes. I call it your fault if you don't have an open mind. I call it your fault if you're not willing to ask the questions. I call it your fault if you're not willing to say to the other person, you're wrong. There has to be a movement, not just a moment. Because it is a fight, not always a fight where you can necessarily prevent yourself from arrest. People during the movement of Martin Luther King and others were arrested for marching for justice, for fighting for justice, for trying to improve themselves. Will we see change? I have to say that my PhD is in leadership and change. I'm all about that. I fight for it every single day. I fight for it for my grandchildren. I fight for it for people in my community. I fight for it for people that I don't even know. I'll stop on the street if I see something that's not right and I'll go, what are you doing? That's not right. My daughter told me one time, Mom, that's not your business. Go get back in your car. That is my business. Because I do believe that ain't none of us free until we all be free. Sometimes sometimes I just want to go in my house and close the door and say I don't want to deal with what's going on out there in the world. It gets to be too hard.
Yes.
It gets to be such a struggle, and you ask yourself, will the struggle ever quiet down? Do I expect it to stop? Sometimes I want it to just kind of ease off, but it doesn't. And so, yes, if you're my color, the struggle is on into the future that I can't give you a date. Not just black folks, not just brown folks, because if you're open and you listen to the world history, you discover racism and discrimination in this world. You see some horrible things that have happened to people. Our concentration is here in America, and we know what has happened to us as people who were brought here against our will and became slaves. But there's some horrible things that happen to other people in the world. There's some horrible things that happen to Jewish people. There's some horrible things that happen to people from Ireland. There's some horrible things that happen to Africans in Africa. But what I think, for me,
forget about the Middle East, of course.
I just can't name everybody. There's horrible things that have happened to people all around the world. There's horrible things that are happening right now, today. Right now, today. We have to look at those things and say, what can I do? What is my responsibility? How can I make a difference? How do I engage this struggle? It's a sacrifice. You give up a lot of your own precious time. You give up a lot of yourself. I ask myself, do I really want to be committed to this level? And sometimes I sit back and I answer my own question and I say, hell no. It's taking too much of me. But when you're driven, when that's your calling, you can't sit back and not do it. Something just makes you stand up and get out and go after it. So that's what I ask us to do. Stand up, get out, and go after it.
Amen.
Make a difference.
Amen.
Can we ask some questions though, or?
I'll be happy to answer questions.